In this video, I'll be going over 9-4, estimating sums and differences of fractions. So in topic 9, our end goal is to be able to add and subtract fractions. So we'll start today by estimating those sums and differences. In this lesson, when we are estimating addition and subtraction problems with fractions, we are going to change each of the numbers, each of the fractions, to either 0, 1/2, or 1 to estimate. So that kind of narrows down our choices and makes things a little bit easier. In order to estimate addition and subtraction problems with fractions, you will need to know if each fraction in the problem is closest to 0, 1/2, or 1 in order to change it to one of those choices. So let's practice with the fraction 5/9. I always start off by looking at how close the fraction is to 1/2, or what 1/2 would be with the denominator, in this case, of 9. So whenever something is half, okay, the top number, like let's say our denominator was 10, for this to be equivalent to 1/2, the top number is half of the bottom number. So the numerator would be half of the denominator, 10. So in this case, 5. For something to be equivalent to a half, let's try it with another denominator. Let's do 200. So for it to be 1/2, the top number needs to be half of the denominator. So half of 200 is 100. Okay, so that's an easy way to find out half of something. So let's go ahead and find out what half is in terms of ninths. So if my bottom number were 9, half of 9 is between 4 and 5. It's actually 4.5. Now, we don't write decimals in fractions. This is not a mathematically correct way of writing things. But just to help me think it through in my head, I know that half of 9 is 4.5. Even though that's not the right way to write it, I'm just going to jot it down there. So it's between 4/9 or 5/9. Okay? Those would be right about at half. So, as you can see, here we have 5/9. So the closest thing, it's really close to 1/2. So by finding out what half is first, I can then go from there and see, is the fraction I'm given close to 1/2? Is it way bigger than 1/2? Then we would choose 1. Is it smaller than 1/2? Then we would choose 0. Let's try again with an addition problem. Actually, this one is subtraction. But it says to estimate the sum or difference by replacing each fraction with 0, 1/2, or 1. So we basically need to do what we did on the last slide twice, for 15/16 and for 1/8. I have this number line drawn here. That's one way that you can kind of help yourself understand if the number is closer to 0, 1/2, or 1. I'm going to do what I did in the last slide first here. And for 16ths, half of 16 is 8. So 1/2 would be 8/16, but I have 15/16, so I have more. So 1/2 would be 8/16, 1 is 16/16, so if I'm just kind of guesstimating, it looks like 15/16 would be about here. So it's closest to 1. We're going to now do the same thing for 1/8. If I were to find what 1/2 is in terms of eighths, it's always half of the denominator, so 4. 4/8 is 1/2. So 8/8 is 1, and then 0/8 is 0. 1/8 would be about here. So it's closer to 0 than it is to something like 4/8. So we'll put that as 0. And now I can solve my problem. 1 minus 0 is 1. So my final estimation is just 1. Let me show you another example. Okay, again, with 16ths, half would be 8/16, 0 is 0/16, and 1 is 16/16. So whether you want to take the time to draw out a number line or not is up to you, but what you could do is kind of just write down these 3 fractions in terms of 16ths to help you out. I notice that 1/16 is much closer to 0/16 than 8 or 16/16. So that means that the closest estimation for that one is 0. And let's do the same for 15ths. When we look at half with an odd number at the bottom, it's hard to find an exact half, okay? But it's between 7 and 8/15 because it's 7.5. So I need to see, is 2/15 closer to 0, 1/2, which is about 7 or 8/15, or 1, which would be 15/15. And it looks like 2/15 would be the closest to 0/15. So I have 0 plus 0, and my estimation is just 0. All right, let's look here at 9/12 first. So half in terms of twelfths, half of 12 is 6. So I could have my choices of 0, which is 0/12, 1/2, which is 6/12, or 1 whole, which is 12/12. The tricky thing here is that 9 is actually halfway in between 6 and 12. So it's as close to 1/2 as it is to 1 whole. So in this case, either choice would be a correct choice. So you have two options here because it's equally as close to 1/2 as it is to 1 whole. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just pick 1 whole because that's easiest for me. Over here, I know that half of 6 is 3, so 1/2 would be 3/6. 0 is 0/6, and 1 is 6/6. So 1/6 is closer to 0/6 than 3/6. So I only have one choice here because it is closer to 0/6. So I can't pick 0/6, 0, or 1/2, 3/6, because it's not equally close to both of them. I only have one choice. You have to pick which fraction it is closer to. You only have two options when it's as close to one fraction as it is to the other. So in this case, 1/6 is closer to 0/6 than 3/6. So I'm going to replace 1/6 with 0, and 1 plus 0 equals 1. My estimation is 1. Try this problem on your own on your blue sheet and bring it with you tomorrow. Change each fraction, 2/5 and 9/11 to either 0, 1/2, or 1, whichever it's closest to, and then add them up. Show your work on your blue sheet and write your answer. Good luck!